Hey everyone, and welcome. This devotional is brought to you by our friends at the You Need Faith in Jesus team. All right, so today we're doing something pretty special. We're closing out the book of Genesis by diving deep into its final incredible chapter. It's a journey, you guys, that literally starts with a coffin and ends with God's unshakable promise. So here's what we've got on tap. We'll start with the passing of the patriarch Jacob. Then we'll follow this amazing funeral procession. After that, we hit a really intense test of forgiveness, and we'll unpack the big idea behind the whole story. God meant it for good. We'll see how a coffin becomes a symbol of hope, and then, most importantly, we'll figure out what all this means for you and me. All right, first up, a patriarch's passing. Our story kicks off in this moment of just profound grief. Jacob, the man God renamed Israel, has just passed away. So let's look at what happened right after. The grief, the honor, and the wisdom shown. I want you to just stop and think about this for a second. The book of Genesis, right? The book of beginnings. It opens with this explosive, life-giving power of God speaking the entire universe into existence. It all starts with creation, but it ends with a coffin, a man in a box in Egypt. And that contrast, wow, from creation to a coffin. That pretty much frames the entire human story, doesn't it? The fall, death, and our desperate need for redemption. And right there in Genesis 50, verse 1, it says, "And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him." Now, this isn't some sign of weakness. Joseph is the second most powerful man in the world, and he is just overcome. This is the beautiful, raw, human reaction of a son who loved his father so much. He's actually living out the command we'd later get in Exodus 20:12 to honor thy father and thy mother. Okay, but look at the wisdom Joseph shows here. He commands his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. See, he very specifically avoids the Egyptian priests because their rituals were all tied up in idolatry. This is just a masterclass in living out your faith. He's honoring his dad with the best technology of the day, but without ever compromising his relationship with God. Okay, so Jacob's body is prepared. And that leads us to our next section, the journey to the promise. What happens next is one of the most incredible funeral processions you'll ever read about. Get this. The Egyptians mourned for Jacob for 70 days. That's a length of time that was usually reserved for Egyptian royalty. It just goes to show you the incredible respect Joseph commanded. Even the pagan world couldn't help but acknowledge the greatness of God working through his servant. And the scale of this procession was just massive. The Bible describes it as a very great company. This wasn't just Joseph and his brothers. We're talking about all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, all the elders of Egypt, plus chariots and horsemen. Think about that. The man who fled this land with nothing but a staff now returns with the entire might of an empire in his funeral procession. What a witness. So on their way, they stop for 7 days at a place called the threshing floor of Ad. And their mourning is so loud, so intense, that the local Canaanites are just stunned. They're so struck by it that they actually rename the place Abel Mizraim, which literally means the mourning of the Egyptians. Their public grief became a permanent landmark, a testimony to everyone who passed by. All right, so they've buried their father, and the family heads back to Egypt. But now the emotional tension that's been bubbling under the surface for decades is about to explode. This brings us to a huge test of forgiveness. And you can just feel the fear, can't you? With their father Jacob gone, the brothers are thinking, uh-oh. They believe the only thing that was holding Joseph back from getting revenge is gone now. The big question looming over them is, will he finally make them pay for what they did? And this contrast here is just heartbreaking, really. On one side, you have the brothers. They're projecting all their own guilt onto Joseph. They're thinking he's going to hate us, he's going to make us his slaves. But Joseph's heart, it's in a completely different place. The scripture says he wept when he heard them, not with anger, but with sadness, that after all this time, they still didn't trust his forgiveness. They offer to be his servants, but all he ever wanted was to be their brother. And Joseph's response in Genesis 50, verse 19, is one of the most powerful lines in the whole book. He says, "Fear not, for am I in the place of God?" Wow, what a question. Joseph completely understands that judgment and vengeance, that belongs to the Lord and to the Lord alone. He refuses to sit in God's chair. And that is a lesson for every single one of us. And that one question, am I in the place of God, leads us right to the theological peak of this entire story. This is where we learn to see everything through the lens of divine providence. Yeah, this verse right here is the whole ball game. Genesis 50, verse 20. Joseph looks his brothers in the eye and says, "But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive." See, he doesn't downplay their sin. He says, you meant it for evil. But then he layers this bigger, more powerful truth on top, that God took their evil intentions and sovereignly wove them into his grand plan of salvation. This is basically the Old Testament's Romans 8:28. And that's what theologians call divine providence. It's this incredible idea that God has the power to take all the chaotic, broken, and even evil plans of people and steer them to accomplish his perfect will. He really is the master weaver, isn't he? He takes the darkest threads of our lives and creates this beautiful tapestry of grace. So let's fast forward now to Joseph's own death. You'd think this would be a sad ending, but it's not. His final words, his final command, actually turn his own coffin into this powerful sermon of hope. Just look at how this covenant promise plays out over time. It starts way back with God's oath to Abraham about the promised land. Then Jacob's family acts on that faith by burying him there. And now Joseph, on his deathbed, makes them swear an oath. He says, "God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence." He's prophesying the Exodus. For hundreds of years, his coffin, his bones, sat there in Egypt as this silent, constant reminder, this isn't our home, God has a promise for us. And sure enough, centuries later, in Exodus 13:19, that's exactly what they do. Okay, so what does this all mean for us right now? How do we take this ancient story and live it out? That's what this last section is all about. Your story, God's providence. Here are 3 really practical ways we can apply Joseph's faith to our own lives. First, see your past through the lens of faith. Look at your history through God's providence, not as a story of victimhood. Second, forgive like Joseph did. Be a vessel of God's grace, not his judge. Refuse to take that seat of judgment. And third, live with expectation. Just like Joseph, we're pilgrims here. We should live with our eyes fixed on the blessed hope of Christ's return. We really hope this devotional has been an encouragement to you. It's been brought to you by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. If God could take decades of betrayal, of slavery, of injustice in Joseph's life and use it to save an entire nation, what evil, what pain, what difficult thing in your life might he be weaving right now into a stunning tapestry of good?